Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 13 of Move Better Mondays. And today we are going to be continuing our discussion on knee stability, specifically talking about two-legged stance. Now, before we get into that, I wanted to apologize last week. This episode was supposed to go out last week, but I had no voice because I had basically pulled off 3 weddings in 7 days. And generally when that happens, you do lose your voice. So basically I spent the entire week not having a voice. So I didn't want to kind of punch something out and just have it not come out as good and have the quality come out poorer. And I actually missed out on a podcast as well. So there's a couple of things that are going on there that I'm going to have to catch up on this week and actually start trying to ramp up. Now, last episode, we spoke about knee stability and how to start the activation process and how to kind of get the whole thing going, and we really spent a lot of time working on the ground. Now, that is essentially the area that is usually forgotten the most but has to be worked on the most because it's the area that we least work on throughout our regular day. We spend a lot of time standing, we spend a lot of time on 2 legs and on 1 leg, but we rarely ever spend time lying on the ground or doing any work on the ground unless you are familiar with the gym or you're doing some kind of sport that requires you to be on the ground. Now, going into the 2-leg stance, this is a really important component of knee stability because we spend a lot of time at the gym doing exercises like deadlifting and squatting and deadlift squat variations that are actually going to require a significant amount of knee stability. Now, this knee stability is something that is really important because, as you know, if we don't have strong knee stability, we're losing power as we move. Now, there are 3 different ways, there are 3 phases or 3 steps to improving your knee stability, but there's also 3 phases that are going to make up the entire, let me zoom out a bit. There are 3 phases that are going to make up the entire knee stability on 2-leg component. So the first one is 2 legs static, second is both those legs moving, and 3 is those knees individually moving. So let's start breaking those 3 down right now. So essentially, when we do that, when we do look at these 3 phases, the most important thing is that we remember that you need to master each one of these phases. You can't break one up by taking it and then kind of just jumping through it and getting to the next one, because each of them is going to bring something that's very valuable to the next one, and you have to master that first and then initial one and then move your way forward. So for all of these basic sections and all these basic phases, we're going to need one specific piece of equipment, which is basically my mini band elastics. These things for me have been essentially a staple in terms of equipment for something that I use. I've never not used these. I've never not had them with me in a gym. I basically carry these around with me everywhere I go. I don't know if you can see my bag's on here. But if I literally had them like kind of latched onto my bag so that I know that I'm always gonna have them with me. I don't have to worry about like looking through my bag to make sure I brought them. They literally hang on the outside of it, so whenever I need them, I just unbuckle it, grab one, buckle it back up, and I'm good to go. And these really provide a lot of value for how much they are. They are basically the only piece of equipment that I really ever absolutely need because it helps me out so much, whether it be upper body, lower body. Now, when we do start looking at all of these different phases, one of the things we really want to make sure we absolutely do is that we spend an irritatingly large amount of time on each specific phase. Jumping from one phase to the other is only going to make things worse. And the reason I say that is because when you look at them, they're so closely held together. They're so close in terms of how in their level of difficulty, but each phase really needs to be mastered. It's one of those things where you get the first 80% of your results and the mastering of it within, you know, the first 2 or 3 times you do them, and that last 20% takes another week or so to 2 weeks to really understand and really grasp and get a completely solid understanding of how to use these bands and how to use each of those exercises and how to master each of those phases. And that's the point of this. We want to make sure that with each of these phases, we are never going to be able to cheat our way through it when we jump to the next phase that little bit too early. We want to make sure that each of those phases is mastered and we're able to progress properly from one to the next. Now, before I go on, I would love it if you guys could subscribe to my channel, leave a comment and hit that thumbs up button. Let me know what you guys think of the episodes and the content that we're really going to be putting on here, and kind of give me an idea of what you guys think. I've been getting some good questions, some good discussions going on that channel so far. So I really want to continue that and start kind of growing this out a little bit more. And a little disclaimer here, these are obviously not the only exercises that work. There's obviously a ton of different ones that do a great job. It just matters what works best for you. And right now, these are the ones that I've noticed that have given me the best results, not for me personally, but also for my clients. And that's why I wanted to teach you guys these next ones that I will talk about. So let's look at each one of those faces individually right now, starting with the first one. I'm gonna turn the camera over here so we can get a better angle and I can kind of step out into this zone here. And so essentially the first thing we need to do is, there we go. Okay, so the first one we're gonna do is we're gonna take the elastic, we are going to bring it up around our knees, and essentially from here, it's really basic. We're just getting it just above the knee line. And from here, what we're doing is we're just getting to a half squat and then just keeping the knees separated. We wanna make sure that the arches are pulled up, but from here, I'm gonna back up so you can see me. I just want you to be able to hear me too. From here, just keeping the knees out and making sure that they're not kind of caving in. They're staying in this position, and what that's gonna do is that's gonna help activate that glute med. Once that glute med is activated, from there we can start learning how to stabilize it and move it, but this essentially is that main phase. Now, the reason I want you to focus on this and to keep the knees out is eventually we wanna make sure that we can control each of these knees individually. We wanna be able to control each leg and each side independently of the other. But before we do that, we need to be able to bring them together and use them and control them all together. And then that way we can progressively bring up that difficulty. So with this, the very simple trick is get into this half squat position, bring the knees apart. You're gonna hold this position for 30 seconds and that's it. Basically this half squat position, 30 seconds, nothing moves, you're staying static, making sure that from the side, your weight is shifted back. So here, 30 seconds and you're gonna go for 3 reps. That is the first phase. Now, the second phase is a little bit more challenging, a little bit more difficult, and essentially what's gonna be happening is we wanna keep the body in the same position. We wanna not move the legs around and have them moving around, but what we wanna do is we wanna actually challenge the stability of that knee and having the knees kind of cave in and come out, and at the same time, we wanna change the depth of our body. So there's 2 exercises we're gonna be doing. The first one is squatting with the elastics, second one is just basically knee tucks in and out. I don't know what they're called, I just call them knee tucks in and out. So first exercise is squatting. Now there's nothing really complicated. This is a very basic exercise. All you're doing is getting back into that initial position that we had in the first phase. And from here, you're just squatting down, getting your full squat and coming right back up. So from the side, very simple, squatting down, coming back up, making sure that that posture is bang on. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get back into that half squat position that we had in the first phase. And from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have both my knees cave in and both my knees come out. Both my knees come in and both come out. So essentially by repeating this movement, bringing them in and bringing them out, what I'm doing is I'm working in my extremes. Now, why the extremes are so important? This is actually a pretty interesting concept that I kind of use a lot. Is I basically teach my clients to understand that if you are working in your extremes, so you're going hard to one side and then all the way into the other, what you're doing is you're actually opening up that spectrum of control. So your ability to control is actually a lot wider. So instead of just being able to control it in a narrow position, you can control a lot wider, which is also gonna make your ability to balance that right in the middle a lot easier. Now again, for the sets and reps of these exercises, it's nothing complicated. We're gonna keep it very basic. The first exercise, which is a squat, all you're gonna do is go for about 10 to 15 reps. The second exercise, which is the knees tucking in and out, you can do that for about 15 reps as well. Now the third and final part, which is a little bit more complicated because it's going to require a little bit more control, is being able to move the legs independently. Now again, this does require two phases as well. So you're going to have one where your knee is going to be tucking in and the other one your whole body is going to be shifting, but again, it's under independent control of the legs. So one leg is moving, the other leg isn't. So the first one, when we get up, we're getting back into that knee tuck position. So a half rep where your knees are going to want to cave in. What you're going to do from here is, instead of having both knees come in and out, you're going to get into that phase one stance with your knees wide. And then from here, the knees are actually going to, let me zoom out here so you can see that. There you go. So your knee is actually going to drop in and pull out. The other one is going to stay stable. So we want to keep a nice alignment with this foot and this knee, and this foot and this knee, and then take this leg, drop it in, bring it back out, bring it back in, and bring it back out. Once we've done that, let's say 15 times on this side, we're gonna repeat and switch to the other side and bring this one in and bring it out. What you wanna remember for this one, which is a little bit of an important point, is to make sure that you're alternating between right and left on which one is starting that set. So let's say the first set, you're gonna have the right leg come in and out, left leg's gonna stay stable. When you do the next set, you wanna switch that around, because even though this one's not moving, the fact that it has to stabilize is actually a lot harder than what you would think. Being able to stabilize and have the other one pull in and out means that it's actually trying to stabilize the knee, but at the same time, stabilize the hip. This guy's gotta hold on tight, this one's gotta hold on tight, so that this knee can move around it independently, and we can control this independent of this leg. The last little point I wanna mention is that when you are doing this exercise, you wanna make sure that your hip doesn't shift from side to side. So even though you are moving that left side, your hip doesn't shift to the right, because if your hip does shift to the right, what ends up happening is that if you shift, your body's not actually stabilizing properly. You're actually teaching yourself to kind of stay put on one side, but then kind of move the other one independently, but they're not really loaded. You're not splitting the weight. You're not under control. You need to be able to keep that weight over your legs so that you can really start messing around with that stability and that kind of stabilization in that nice neutral position, in that nice straight on balance position. So from here, that brings us over to the last exercise, which I did go over in the knee pain portion, which I'll link right up here. If you did watch that one, you should know what this one is, the link that was right up there a couple of seconds ago. That one is basically gonna be the crab walk. So the crab walk is essentially just a side shuffle of that initial position. So go back to step one, phase one, which is why I told you these phases have to be mastered, because they keep coming back up in everything we're gonna be doing. So get back into that phase one stance, and from here, taking a wider stance, bringing the leg back in, wider stance, bringing the leg back in. So what I wanna do is, if you notice, my legs aren't coming all the way out and slapping back in together. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to maintain a nice position the entire time. So I'm going wider than I should be, back to where I should be, a little bit wider, and back to where I should be. So you want about a 6-inch step at the very most. What that's gonna do is that's gonna allow you to keep that control and keep that tension on that muscle, which is essentially what we want. I'm just gonna lower the camera here because I'm not gonna be standing up anymore. So when you get into that position, you're able to control it and you're staying there and you're actually able to move it around. What you're doing is you're teaching those hip stabilization muscles that are really the ones that are controlling your knee to actually fire while your body's loaded. Now that's a differentiating factor between lying down and standing up, is the activation of those hip muscles. Now what's happening is that when you are standing up, you are loading that joint, and that's causing the speed of those stabilization muscles to kick in. We want those muscles to be able to stabilize fast so that the other slower muscles, the ones that are generating all the power, aren't having to kick in because the other ones aren't firing. We want the stabilization muscles to activate extremely quickly, lock you in place, and then hold you there. That way we can get that leg and kind of control it and stabilize it, and not have the quads and the hamstrings to try to stabilize that massive bone and that massive joint. And again, remember that the main idea amongst everything that I've ever done holds true. Consistency is the key factor. If you're not consistent with this, don't even bother doing it, because you're never gonna get the results you want. The idea and the goal here is to maintain consistency, because that's gonna be the component that's gonna allow you to go from here to here, which is no stability, to high stability at the knee, which is going to help your performance. And remember that a lot of these exercises don't require a lot of time. 5 to 10 minutes just here and there throughout the day is actually going to speak volumes about your knee stability and your improved performance. So if you guys liked what you saw today, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and I will see you guys next week.